All right. Hello and welcome to the getting a month ahead of myself, the March 2025 5 miles from everywhere, anywhere meeting. I'm a little tongue-tied this morning, featuring Margie Deck and several of the authors who are featured in her book, Sherlock Holmes Into the Fire. So just give me 1 second. I'm going to share my screen, start the slideshow, and then I don't have too many announcements, but we'll go with there. Okay. Right. Here we go. All right. So here is our agenda for today. We'll have announcements, and I only have two, and then it'll be Margie Deck and the authors for Sherlock Holmes Into the Fire, and then of course a little discussion or Q&A from you all at the end. So that's our agenda for this morning or afternoon, depending on where you live. I suppose some of you might be at night because I know we got someone from Paris on. Okay, so just two announcements today. The first one is don't forget that 221 BCon is coming up next month. It's April, I don't know, it says 15th. There should be April 11th through the 13th. Okay, Bollinger Books is a sponsor of it this year, and we would really love if you would make it. If you do, I'm not going to be able to be there, but Brian will be there, and make sure you say hi to him. He's going to be leading a discussion, a panel, and then also we'll be selling some books. So make sure you stop by and say hello.
Yeah.
And do you want to say something, Brian?
No, just yeah.
Okay. Okay. You're welcome to jump in. And then the other one comes from one of our members who's going to start his own Scion Society, the Goose Club of the Alpha. This is a new Scion Society in Virginia Beach, and Walt Taylor is starting it up. And Walt, you're on. Do you want to say a couple of things, like what you're thinking you want the Scion to be like?
Oh, well, first of all, I like what you've already done with it. I mean, gee, gracious sakes, the Goose Club of the Alpha. There used to be a science society in Williamsburg, I think, the Cremona Fiddlers, which I was never able to attend because at that time I was living in Stanton, Virginia. And also at that time, I met one of our fabulous Sherlockians there, and he told me I should start a science society in Stanton. Well, I didn't get to do that. I moved with my wife down here to Virginia Beach. And since last Christmas, I could not find a goose to eat for my Christmas dinner for less than like $150. Well, of course, I went over to my son's house in England. He got me one. I don't know how much that cost, but I'm wondering if we can't start maybe a Zoom or a science society down here in Virginia Beach called the Goose Club of the Alpha. Now, there's a couple of alphas here. We'll just pretend like it's the original Alpha in. And if you interested in it, want to talk to me about it, and maybe including in Zoom and that sort of thing, you can email me at gooseclub@myyahoo.com. All right.
All right, thanks, Walt. And if you want to send me that email address, I can share it with the group when we're done. Be
Certainly
happy to
shall.
do that. And really look forward to it. And if you do a few meetings on Zoom, I'm sure a lot of us will join. So thank you very much. Look
Thank
forward
you.
to that. All right. Those are the only announcements that I had that anyone had contacted me about. Let me going to stop sharing just for a second because sometimes people like to shout out some announcements. So let me stop sharing. Does anybody else have an announcement for the team? I see Steve Mason's hand waving there. Steve, what's up?
Just wanted to remind people that the Legion of Zoom will be holding our fourth annual virtual conference on Sunday, March 15th at 1 Central. We have 6 speakers that we're really excited about, and I'll put the registration link in to the chat. We have 87 people already registered for it, so I think we'll probably go over 100 people. So that's pretty neat. So
Awesome. And again, Steve, if you want to send me the link, I can send it out to the group too.
yeah, I'll do that.
Okay, thanks, man. All right. Anybody else have any announcements before we move on? And because there's so many of us, I might not be able to see it, so you might just need to unmute and shout out if you do.
Shana Carter. Shana Carter.
Okay, Shayna.
Hi. For anyone in the New York area, this coming Wednesday, the 5th, is the monthly Ash Wednesday get together. Jen Nealon is handling the arrangements for that this month. And then on the 29th is the meeting of the Priory Scholars, and I believe we will be discussing Sign of Four.
Awesome. Oh, you'll have a lot to talk about. That's great. Excellent. Very good. Okay, any last announcements? Oh, we got another one that Sherlock Monthly from Ed, Black Peter with co-host Max McGee and Glenn Marinker. And
Yeah,
there's a link to that.
that'll be a nice book because Glenn has the Black Peter manuscript, so we'll get to share
Right.
images of that and talk about it, and that's on
Wow.
Saturday, March 15th. That'll be fun.
Excellent. Sweet. Yeah, we don't want to miss that. That's amazing. Thanks, Ed. All right. I think we're good to move on. I don't see anybody else. Okay. Well, going back for a second here, because we've got quite the crew today on our call here. Margie Deck, for those of you who don't know, lives in the Pacific Northwest, where she is in the beginning stages of her first novel, a Gothic murder mystery wrapped around a hard look at loss and grief. Her first Gothic story collection, The Genius of the Place, debuted from Belanger Books in late December 2023. She just won a Doylean Award for it. Okay, if you didn't know that. And her first collection of Sherlock Holmes pastiches with remarkable cunning, The Manservant of Merripit House and Other Tales of Sherlock Holmes, was also published by Belanger Books in December 2023. She is the co-editor with Nancy Holder of the anthology Sherlock Holmes of Baking Street. She is also a co-editor with Nancy Holder of the Terror of Blue John Gap manuscript annotation project. And if you haven't been to that website, you definitely got to check that out. It's for the Arthur Conan Doyle Society. She is also a writer for and the happy editor of the new book. We are here to discuss Sherlock Holmes Into the Fire. Well, she'll be happy again about being the editor once the copy editing is finally finished next week. So let's give a warm virtual round of applause to Margie. And thank you to the authors who were able to join us on this call. And Margie, you have the floor.
Okay, well, I'm going to try not to talk about too much in the beginning and just let the people talk because they're a lot more interesting. But just to give you a brief history, Sherlock Holmes Into the Fire was actually Mark Jones's brainchild about, oh my gosh, Nancy, what, 4 years ago at this point?
Please, yeah.
Right? At that time, there was a very robust Sherlockian Twitter chat, and he was talking about how fun it would be to take Conan Doyle's Round the Fire stories and turn them into Sherlock Holmes adventures. And he said it just in a tweet, and on we went, and it just stuck in my head. It's like, that is a great idea for a book. So we ended up talking to him, and he talked to Nancy and I, and we talked to Derek, and we did all this thing around, and we couldn't get schedules to work, and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, here we are probably 4, maybe 5 years on at this point, and we have a book. Mark wrote the introduction for the book, and it's delightful. I hope you read it. He is a fun fellow. And then 17 people whose work I really admire, I just went out and said, hey, you want to come write for this weird thing? And nobody turned me down. It was just marvelous. The weird thing appealed to a lot of people. Maybe I like weird people. I don't know. No, I'm teasing. But so we have some very interesting writers who are with us today who participated in the book. We were about 50-50 of us wrote sequels to the original story and let Holmes kind of explain what happened, if it was explainable, and if it wasn't explainable, why not? And the other half just rewrote the original adventure and let Holmes sort it all out. So it's really a nice mix in the book. The book is structured in the order that Doyle arranged his original stories. So from the beginning, we knew who was going first and what was going to happen. And I believe it ended up with a really nice flow. So apparently, whatever editor he had back in 1908 with Smith and Elder, they knew what order those stories needed to be in because it really does read well, I believe. You can ask poor Carla Cope. She's been through it twice already, bless her, helping me look for boo-boos. And so, but I think it has a really nice flow about it. So what I'd like to do today, I would just like to go from person to person who are here and ask you a couple of questions and let you talk for a minute. And then we'll go to the next author so that everybody gets a chance to talk for a second. And then I'm just going to open it up for questions because you guys are interesting and this is an interesting group here listening, and I know they'll have things that they want to ask you. Does that sound okay? We're good? Okay, so Carla, you're up. You're my first one in my list.
Okie dokie.
Okay.
Bring it on.
So first thing, 2 minutes or a minute or two, just tell us a little bit about you and what you like to write.
I am a pastiche writer, and I have written many short stories that have been published in a number of magazines. I edit the Sherlock Holmes Mystery Magazine. Hint, hint, if you're interested in subscribing or sending me something, send it to me. And so when Margie asked me if I would be willing to do this, I was feeling that pastiche itch that you get, where you just know it's about time to start another one. And this was a great idea.
Okay, great. So which story do you have?
I have the Jew's breastplate.
Okay. And now you actually rewrote it and just put Holmes in it, in the middle of it. And
Right.
in the interview you wrote for us for the Kickstarter, which I hope you guys all read those when they come out because fascinating people. You talked about that you had to dim down the original people from the original story so that Holmes could straighten them out. And
Right.
so I started thinking about some of the dimmer people that are in the canon. And I just wondered if you used any of them for inspiration or how you went about dimming them down.
It wasn't that difficult. I mean, neither of them were the brightest tools in the shed, and it was part of the reason that they figured out what went on is they just happened upon a way to oversee the heist or the anti-heist, I guess. And so it wasn't that difficult. The problem was that there were a couple of moments where as a writer, I sort of thought, no, why did he do that? This is weird. And so it was a choice of do I keep that or do I just jettison it? And in several cases, I simply said, well, that little point doesn't need to be made. We're just going to ignore it. But on the whole, I tried to cleave very close, as close as I possibly could to the original.
Okay. All right. I loved it. Obviously, I've been telling you 100 times how much I love it. Okay, real quick before we move on to somebody else. So you said also in your interview that you're currently writing something about a mystery set in London during the Blitz. Do you want to give us just a little minute of what you're doing?
This is actually a sequel to a short story I wrote several years ago for an anthology with a fellow who is from the East End of London. He's a bit dodgy. He is not able to serve because he has a withered arm. And of course, everybody calls him Kaiser because his name is Wilfred, so he is Kaiser Bill. And he has his own set of morals. So yes, a little black marketing here and there, some cigarettes that fall off the transport, that's fine, but threatening, murder, that kind of thing, he stands up to. So it's been fun doing the research. There is actually a website where you can see where every single bomb that fell in London, where it landed during the Blitz. So that's really very cool. And just having a good time with the characters.
Okay. So he's one that when Holmes caught him, he would let him go.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
His heart's in the right place.
Fair enough. The necessary tools now and again. That's what you have to do. Okay. Thank you, Carla. All right. Paul Hiscock, where are you? There you are. I have to find all
Hi.
the screens. Hello. Thank you for coming from England, so to speak. So tell us a little bit about you and what you write.
Well, I write all sorts of things. Lots of mysteries, science fiction, fantasy, horror, anything that anybody's willing to publish, basically. But most of my output, at least in recent years, has been Sherlock Holmes pastiches. So seem to have found a niche there.
Okay. All right. So which story did you do?
It was The Man with the Watches.
Okay. And why were you interested in that one?
Uh, but the first I picked it mainly because of the name, to be honest with you. It just struck me as such a wonderful name for the story, and one of the reasons why I haven't particularly vastly renamed my version of it. It was just too good. That and the fact that I just love mysteries set on trains. I mean, I've all of the Murder on the Orient Express, all of these things. It seems such a wonderful setting with that contained environment and limited amounts of suspects and options. It seems perfect for a murder mystery. So I chose
Okay.
it on that basis, and then actually read the story after I said to you I wanted to do it to find out what I'd let myself in for.
Okay, sounds good. So in your interview that you did for us for the Kickstarter, thank you. You said you had written some science fiction westerns, which I found interesting. So my question I was thinking about what you said is that how is writing Holmes different from writing a western? Is there similarities with
I don't
Holmes
know.
stories and westerns?
Not a great deal. I mean, that in that particular instance, it was a science fiction setting with bringing together copies of lots of characters from previous Western movies
Oh,
and books and
okay.
things. So from that perspective, again, it was getting to play with other people's characters, which I have to say I greatly enjoy. And that one of the nice things about that one was I'm not mentioning, I didn't mention any of the characters by name, but going through and trying to make them all recognizable to readers who might want to spot them. And I like all those little touches of details that you might just skirt over. So, for example, I love putting in my stories, home stories, references to other cases that
Mhm.
might have happened that maybe I'll write one day, and those sorts of references out to say that there's a bigger world out there.
Excellent. Okay. And what else are you writing right now?
Right now, I'm busy writing proposals for more Holmes stories.
Oh,
So I've got to the end of all the ones I promised recently, so it's on to the next batch. So I'm putting together some proposals for the next in the Year of Mystery set that's been contributing to over the years, and if coming up with some ideas for a couple of the other collections that Bellinger Books recently posted about to hopefully take part in as many as possible.
okay. Sounds good. Well, thank you. Okay. Nancy Holder,
Hi, Margie.
my partner in crime. So tell us a little bit about you, Nancy.
Well, I've been a writer for many decades, and in the Sherlockian world, I've written pastiches, articles, essays, comic books, and an online game. And I'm just still here.
Thankfully.
I was overloaded. Margie invited me to co-edit this with her, and I, I didn't do it. And I'm glad I didn't because you did such a stellar job on your own, dude. And we were going to write our story together, but then because now she was editing, I did the cat story on my own. But anyway, right. I guess you're going to ask me a question later, so I won't say everything, but I'm just a professional writer, and I've also been a creative writing teacher and an editor for a long time.
Okay, well, go ahead and tell us about your story.
All right, my story is The Brazilian Cat, which is my story is called The Jungle Cat. And now I wish I'd talked to Carla before I did it because I too found the people in my story so stupid that I'm like, guys, it's clear, but the writing was so beautiful. I reread it this morning. I'm like, dang, this is really beautifully written. And so I changed the villain in the story. I tried to add it, like Henry James would say, a turn of the screw. And I hope I was successful. I tried to play fair. And so that was my take on if I tell this story straight, I think for our modern audience who can guess and who already knows Sherlock Holmes so well, that it would have to be something a little more complex. So I really wish I'd done what Carla did. But I like what I did. I know
I
that
like what you did
the
too.
story was hard to do. I guess that's why. I feel like they said you could swim across the pool, and I went, okay, well, I'll do the breaststroke for a quarter of the way, and then I'll do the backstroke, and then I'll do. And if I just said, oh, I'll swim across the thing and distract you in the middle, then maybe it would have been an easier lap across the pool.
I enjoyed it very much.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
It was very well done, and I liked the twist.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for finding my extra set of quotation marks.
I will tell you a quick story that Nancy and Holder and I met several years ago, probably 10 years ago now. But our very first conversations were about the Brazilian cat. It was my first time to read a Doyle story that was not a Sherlock Holmes. And we had many conversations about how that cage worked and where that door went and drew pictures. And that's when we realized, you know what, we can kind of talk to each other. So it's kind of it has a special place in our heart. So there we go.
I'm laughing, Margie, because I was going back through the iterations of the story, like when I first turned it into you, and there's this long thing in red about how the cage works. And like, I still don't quite get the cage, but now I have the cage understood. So, but it's a long slog to get that cage right, but
okay, fair enough. All right, so in your interview you did for us, thank you. You talked about a story you did called Cat Father. And so now I'm fascinated between your jungle cat and tell us about Cat Father. Because that's
in Cat Father, the Frankenstein if you know the story of Frankenstein, and I know I have like 30 seconds left. The story of Frankenstein ends in the Arctic cold, and the Frankenstein creature has been making Dr. Frankenstein chase him forever. And so in my story, during all of this, the creature finds a little kitten and starts taking care of the kitten and almost sacrifices his life for the kitten. And so this love for the cat permeates the story, and he has an adventure saving the cat's life. And all these things happen. And I discovered later that in Islam, there's a revered character who is considered the father of cats. And so I named him Cat Father at the end of the story. So anyway, it was to me a very moving story. I'm a big Mary Shelley freak. So that was a really, I thought, oh, cats, and here I'm a dog person. So we're actually dog sitting at St. Bernard right now. So if she barks, that's what's going on. It's the hound of North Beach, Port Townsend, Washington.
okay, we work a little on the title, but anyways, thank you, Nancy. Okay, Will Murray, where are you?
Right here.
You're right here. Where are you physically? You're not very close to us.
Just outside of Boston.
Okay. All right. So tell us a little bit about what you do.
Well, I'm a longtime writer and novelist. My current activities center around the Wild Adventure series, which started off with the licensed character Doc Savage and expanded to Tarzan, John Carter of Mars, the Spider, Cthulhu, and others, including Sherlock Holmes, which I don't license, of course. And I also write a nostalgia column for Retro Fan magazine, where I cover 1960s, 70s, and 80s TV shows, books, authors, artists, etc., etc. And I do a lot of other writing. And of course, Sherlock Holmes has been a significant part of my writing career for the last, I guess, 7 or 8 years. I think I've done slightly more than 50 stories.
So you're actually like that Derek fellow over there. I figured you probably sleep 2 hours a day because I don't know how you do everything that you do. It's just
I
amazing.
do other things I don't talk about, but I'm primarily a writer.
Okay. So tell us about your story for Into the Fire.
Well, it's a sequel to The Mystery of Jelland's Voyage, which is, if I recall correctly, I locked onto right away when I looked at the PDF of the original book. And I think I was attracted to it because it was open-ended. It was an unusual story in that it didn't have a definitive ending. The two British thieves who embezzled money in Yokohama, Japan, bought a yawl and took off and got caught up in a storm in which they presumably met their destruction. But since it was presumed, I had a lot of latitude to sequel it. And that's what I did. It was not really practical to relocate Holmes to Yokohama, Japan. And since in my thinking, the original objectives of the two thieves were to get to California or someplace on the U.S. West Coast, then it made sense that the yacht would be found on the U.S. West Coast. And from that, it became a question of, okay, what happened with the two thieves and how does Sherlock Holmes come into it? And I discounted the idea that Sherlock Holmes would go all the way to Washington State just to investigate the mystery of a beached yacht of unknown origin. So I had a harbor master reach out to him by letter, and the entire case is discussed and resolved through letters, which is something I've never done before, but I assume other people probably have.
Well, when I was thinking about your story, it really takes us back to Sherlock Holmes's roots as a consulting detective.
Right.
He talks about, I just sit here and people come to me and they and I solve their problem. Of course, in your story, he goes out and does a lot of research and legwork and talking to people and building his case all the way across the world. So little did you know you were setting your story like an hour from Nancy and me. I'm on this side, she's on this side, and that place is pretty close to the middle between us. So
I dismissed California as just too cliched and decided let's just do something different. Washington State. I may have been looking for a specific bay or harbor or someplace, a port that could be used, and that was probably part of my thinking.
Okay. So in the email that you sent to me, you said that you resorted to this long distance approach. When you were done with it, were you happy that you approached it that way after all?
I don't think there was any other logical or intelligent way to do it. Again, you can't, Holmes would not go to America for one obscure case that wasn't compelling. He certainly wouldn't go to Yokohama, Japan, because the yawl had left Yokohama, Japan. So again, you have to be logical when you're doing a Sherlock Holmes story. And this was a logical solution. And I was happy I didn't have to rewrite the story and try to fit Holmes into it, which I thought would be cumbersome. Other stories in the collection might have lent themselves to that solution, but mine, kept Holmes on Baker Street and operating as a brain, a deductive creature.
That's great. Okay, so tell us real quick what else you're writing. All of the 973 things. No.
Well, I've got a collection of my articles on the famous pulp magazine and radio character, The Shadow, in production. My fifth Wild Adventures of Sherlock Holmes collection will probably come out this spring. That's a mock-up of the cover behind me. I'm currently in the end stages of writing my craziest pulp novel, Secret Agent X versus Dr. Death. And I just turned in my most recent Will Murray's 20th Century column on Nancy Drew, who was the first detective character I ever read in third grade, way back when.
Way back when. Well, thank you. Well, thanks for working us into the schedule there. Okay. Na Ching, where are you?
Here
our fellow Washingtonian and fellow SOB. Hey, the Washington's crew's here.
Yay!
Yay. So tell us a little bit about what you do.
Okay, so I am a wife and a mom to three, and I also work as a talent uh, relations manager for Crystal Lake Publishing, which is a little independent publisher. They do a lot of horror and mystery, and so I write a lot of horror and mystery. And lately, it's been a lot of Sherlock Holmes pastiche, and it's been really fun because I've been a Sherlockian since I was like 10.
Excellent. Okay. So tell us about your story that you did for the book.
Okay, so I picked the brown hand.
Oh.
And the reason I picked the brown hand was because it was so close to when I was a little girl, I would always hear my dad would tell me the man with the golden arm. So we had that campfire story, and it really reminded me of that and resonated with me. So I went over and also it was kind of scary. It sounded scary. I have to write the scary stuff. So that's why I picked the brown hand and working Sherlock Holmes into it.
Okay. So I was going to ask you, do you use a lot of folklore as inspiration when you're writing horror?
Yeah, I do. I actually do. And I research all the monsters and everything and try to find out like what really kills them, what they really do. I even I've written some things where it's like because I'm Samoan, one of the things many things I am, um, I will write about the like folklore of Samoa, there was a monster called the Veni High and I've done that. And yeah, so I do a lot of research and I did a lot of research here trying to get it just right.
Well, I think you got it just right. It's a very good story. So what was I going to ask you? You said that you found a lot of little niches when you were rewriting it, that it was easy to put Holmes in.
Yeah, it was like I've always okay, so when I first read The Final Problem and I realized that large space of time between The Final Problem and The Empty House, I came to realize, well, Conan Doyle had put in the part about the air gun. And then later he brings the air gun back in The Empty House. So you can see that he had that kind of continuity going. And when I was reading the story, it was like, well, gosh, Sherlock Holmes could be in the background right here. He could be the one telling the guy what to do. He could be, it's like he's hidden and he could erase himself from the story. So
excellent. All right, so tell us really quick what else you're writing.
I'm actually going to be writing a poetry collection about Sherlock Holmes with a poem for each story, but it's going to be like supernatural, frightening sort of aspect.
Well, I'll just pre-order today, take my money. And so you got that, Derek? Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
David Markham, where are you? Another one who never sleeps, I'm convinced.
Hello. I'm here. Hi.
You're here. Oh, here. It's okay, David. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
I am the senior civil engineer for my hometown. I live in East Tennessee near the Smoky Mountains. Besides that, about 10 years ago, I got the idea to edit a Sherlock Holmes book. And from there, things have spiraled into a lot more editing and a lot more writing. So that's my way to step into the Sherlockian sandbox.
Okay. I believe you told me you've edited over 1,100 stories at this point.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So we will accept that you're in the sandbox. You've got sand everywhere. So you really interested me what you said when I invited you onto this, that you had not read any of Doyle's other work outside of you tell them the part in the canon. So you tell me how you worded that.
To me, the only thing I've read by Doyle are the middle sections of A Study in Scarlet and The Valley of Fear, because I believe Watson wrote the rest of the canon.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, so none of these stories really meant anything to you.
The Man with the Watches and the Lost Special, I had read those because they're canon tangential some, and I think some European countries actually include those stories as part of the canon. in addition to the other 60 stories.
Right.
So I had read those.
Okay. So tell us about your story.
Well, you had given me an early chance to pick a story, and I was initially going to take one of those because of the Sherlockian connections. But then I decided, I'd rather get challenged a little bit. So I just picked at random The Black Doctor, which is about a doctor in a village who is beloved, and then suddenly he's not beloved anymore. And then he's found murdered, and the brother of his fiance is accused. And it was interesting to read to me because it was very dry. It was just like reading a newspaper report or a court transcript. There wasn't a lot of dialogue. There wasn't a detective or a character finding out what was going on, or it was just like you were kind of seeing it from beginning to end, like you open up a newspaper and read it.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't quite sure what to do with it or how to include Holmes until I had the idea to include Conan Doyle as a character. He happens to be with Holmes and Watson when they're approached to investigate this case. So I've written, I think, 7 other stories where Doyle is a character with Holmes and Watson. And in this case, he kind of became comic relief. He was kind of Nigel Bruce. And I was laughing out loud as I wrote some of his parts. And then you came back and said, you can't do this. So I had to take out a lot of what I liked about that. But I'm actually going to put it back in when I include it in one of my own books.
To be fair, I didn't take it all out. We just toned it down just a little bit.
But it ended up being a lot of fun. I thought I found some loose ends that weren't explained, like some of the timeline things where witnesses would talk about something and it didn't jive up. So I think I kind of hopefully explained some of that and tied up some of that.
Well, personally, I think your final story is much better than Doyle's original, for exactly the reasons that you're talking about, that it was a little bit dry and a little bit procedural.
Well, you and I had talked about that, about how this is around the fire stories where you're supposed to read them around the fire and feel a thrill and a chill. And I didn't really feel that in this story when I read it. You had said maybe it was the circumstances of the dead man's death, but it wasn't really chilling.
Right. Well, were you at all disappointed that there wasn't any, or were you relieved there wasn't any paranormal elements that you had to deal with?
Well, if that had been in the story that I had picked, I would have changed it to make it a natural, non-supernatural explanation.
Okay.
Because that's kind of in the rule of thumb in the stories that I've edited. There can always be at the end maybe a circumstance of what if, but the actual solution has to be a non-supernatural solution. So that's what I would have done with if that had turned out this way.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your patience and allowing me to turn the meter a little bit, because I think it turned out really well.
I understand your perspective on that. It came back. I did maybe push it a little far.
Okay. So tell us quickly what you're doing next tomorrow, or,
Well, actually, this morning I finished my 36th Solar Pond story. And I'm finishing up the final edits on the final 4 volumes of the MX anthology, which is 49, 50, 51, and 52. So hopefully by next weekend, I'll have finished reading all those stories, and then I'm going to have a lot more free time than I've had in the last 10 years.
Okay. Well, congratulations. And thank you for your service, David.
Thank you.
You have given us a lot. Okay. So, Katie Darby, where are you? Here you are.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, that works. Hi.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Okay, sure. So I'm a historical novelist primarily, Victorian era, Kelsey's, and writing teacher and editor, and I run a live event called Liars League, a short story event in London, which is where I am right now. And I have been writing the Holmes pastiches. A writer friend of mine sent me the link. Since 1881 and 1882, I've had a story in all of those volumes so far. And yeah, it's a sort of guilty pleasure for me because I know I should probably be working on more of my own stuff, my original stuff. But yeah, I've done two stories per year since for the volumes that have come out so far, and I also did a Sherlock Holmes pastiche story in Homes for the Holidays, I think it was called, about set around different holidays, and that was for Burns Night, so the Scots celebration of Robbie Burns. Yeah, that's it.
Cool. Okay. Excellent. So tell us about your story that you did, Into the Fire.
Okay, so the one I chose, I was looking at a few of them, including the club-footed grocer, and I had kind of ideas for things to do with my shortlist, and I sort of presented them to my writing group, and they all like the idea of B24, which I really liked as well. It's got these gothic elements to it. It's got this sort of automatism where she comes down and she's almost like in a trance, but she's and then the husband comes down and we just don't know what happened behind the door. When the burglar is behind the door, he can hear them arguing. And we've got his version of events, but is he unreliable? So I thought there was just loads of possibilities, loads of different ways that these two narratives could be sort of, you could get Holmes in there, or that they could be reinterpreted. So I did one of those which you described as a sequel, basically. So the events of my story take place about 3 years after the initial crime, when Lady Mannering, racked with guilt, comes to Holmes, and she just can't rest because this poor burglar guy, he's in prison, and she doesn't remember anything about what happened that night herself. She's had a sort of traumatic memory loss, and she asks him to investigate. So yeah, and I got to use some real people. Well, one real person. We got to go to New Scotland Yard, the Black Museum. Is it New Scotland Yard? Anyway, Scotland Yard, the Black Museum, and look at the evidence from the case, which is in like a glass case. The blood spattered nightgowns and things. And Dr. Edward Petrovsky, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, was a real blood spatter expert. He was one of the people who pioneered the field. And he's a character in the story. So yeah.
Well, I appreciated that because I did not know that they were doing blood spatter analysis that early. So
absolutely.
I was kind of fascinated by what you did with that. Now
it was total Sherlock.
It is total Sherlock. I was just when you got him over the glass case with this thing and studying I could just see it. It's like, definitely, let's film this tomorrow. I'm ready. So you said that you were having some fun turning Lady Mannering from a villain to a heroine. So did you think that Doyle writes good female villains?
Ooh, yeah, I enjoy. I think obviously I think he does really good kind of feisty heroines. I do quite like the female villains who exist, and she's so in the original she's so sort of cold and vicious really towards her husband, but we know that she's been abused, like he abuses her as well. She's had this terrible time. So yeah, I think he's shows what that has done to her, how her husband has kind of just ripped the humanity from her, and then she just cracks. So yeah, I do think he does write good female villains, and I particularly liked her, and I like the idea of redeeming her a bit more. I was like, I don't want it to be straightforward. Where's the challenge if Holmes just goes, well, Lady Mannering did it, sorry madam, you've lost your memory. It was you. Yeah, so I wanted to kind of a more complex, non-obvious solution to the problem, and as soon as I thought of that, I was like, oh, okay, great. I didn't want it to be kind of too obvious, from people who'd read the original stories. I'd read all of the original stories, I'd listened to them on audiobook, so I remembered them, and yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people will have come to these stories fresh, but also there'll be people who know the stories, and I think it's fun if you know what happens in the original, and then you're like, oh, okay, different ending.
Loved it. Okay, so tell us really quickly what Liars League is. You went by that rather quickly, and it's kind of everywhere I see your name, I see Liars League. It's like, well, what is that? That sounds like something we might have fun with.
Oh, Totally will. Yeah, we've got a submission deadline closing tomorrow, actually. It's a live event in London, and there was a New York chapter and there was a Hong Kong chapter as well. And then, their websites are still up, but with the London one is still running. Every 2 months, we have actors basically read short stories aloud to an audience. So it's live literature. And we look for stories between 800 and 2,000 words, and we always have a theme, and this month's theme is risk and reward. So yeah, if anyone's got a story of that length, I know most people kind of probably write a bit longer than that. But up to 2,000 words. We love new authors. We love to kind of have returning authors. We accept submissions internationally, and if people can make it to the event in London, we buy you drinks and dinner, and if not, we buy you a book. So a small reward, payment in kind.
I love it. Okay, really quick, what else are you writing? And then we'll move on.
Absolutely. I've got a story sketched out for 1889 anthology, the Bellinger anthology, Year of Mystery, and I'm just reading about the Royal Baccarat scandal for 1890, and I'm working on a Victorian folk horror novel of my own, which I promise myself I will finish as soon as possible.
Okay, well, we'll look forward to it. Thank you. All right, Katie. Yay. All right. Lisa, where are you?
Right here.
Are you here? Are you with me? There you are. Okay, I have to find the squares, find the squares. Zoom is not my strong suit, guys.
Oh gosh,
I haven't even looked at the chat, so I'm hoping that I'm not missing a million things I should be paying attention to. But okay, so tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Okay, I am a retired federal worker, and honestly, it was the best decision. Well, no, I always tell people the second best decision I ever made. My first best decision was marrying my husband. But my second one was deciding to retire just before COVID. I was presented with an opportunity, and I took it, and I'm not sorry at all that I took it. Which, for one thing, it gave me more time to write. But I had been writing before that. I have a series. It's called The Early Case Files of Sherlock Holmes, and it starts off when he's 13 and his mother's accused of murdering the village midwife. And he has to catch the real killer before she hangs. And I have, huh?
I said, that's a little deep. Okay.
Yeah. it was, and because of all the research I was doing, I decided that other people could benefit from what I was, all the research I was doing. So I started writing essays about Victorian England, which I then shared with Sherlockian societies all over the world. And every 2 years, I put them into a book. And so I have 5 volumes of the life and times of Sherlock Holmes. And I just pull out a little something from either from the canon. It's always something that's based on something that's mentioned in the canon. One of my favorites was I came across, he mentions in The Dying Detective that he puts Vaseline on his forehead. And I'd have a whole essay on the origin of Vaseline, which I found fascinating. I won't go into it now because I don't have time, but it was fascinating. It's in volume 5 of The Life and Times of Sherlock Holmes if you want to find out more. And so, beyond that, the first thing I published, well, I had a couple of short stories published, and then I had a novel published in 2012, which was called Saving Hope, which is set in Russia because I spent 5 years in Russia, and this is it's a thriller set in Russia. So I have a little bit going on beyond Sherlock Holmes.
Yes, fingers and pies. Okay, so tell us about your story.
My story is The Lost Special, and my story, well, no, my story is based on The Lost Special. It's a sequel. And well, first of all, there's a possibility that Sherlock Holmes was involved. There's a mention of a letter, and the guy and somebody says, and I'm going to get, unless I have the quote in front of me, I won't get it quite right. But there's this thing he mentions, however improbable,
whatever remains, yeah.
Whatever remains is what happened. And so, and it's mentioned in there, and you're kind of going, oh, okay, even though it doesn't say Sherlock Holmes, it might have Sherlock Holmes in it. It probably does include Sherlock Holmes. But mine is a sequel. It takes place, what is it, 8 years after the original story. And because somebody is saying they have solved it, and or they know where the missing train is. And what I pulled out of the original story that really brought it out, when what I wanted to focus on was, he mentioned in the letter from, probably was Sherlock Holmes, to a newspaper. He says there's a colliery Camorra, which is the colliery are coal mine owners. And so it's the mafia of the coal mine owners. And that's where I got the title, which is the Black Diamond. What is it?
Brotherhood.
Society. Huh?
Brotherhood, wasn't it?
Brotherhood. You're right. Yeah.
I've read it a few times.
Yeah. I wrote it, but I haven't probably read it as many times as you. The Black Diamond Brotherhood. And so that was where I got how this mafia isn't the effect of this mafia and what he's going to do about attacking the mafia.
Okay. So did it help you or hurt you that Holmes is more or less already in the story? Were you glad or were you kind of disappointed?
Yeah, mostly I just was trying to figure out how he had these clues and things, and how did I make sure he got the clues, and what was, and how he could explain that he was there but nobody knew about it, and things like that. I also have a lot of fun with Watson. I always think he's given a short shrift in the original books. People, like the Nigel Bruce character that's kind of bumbling around, and I always think Watson's a little bit smarter and more on the ball. And so in a lot of the pastiches that I've written, I usually have Watson being a little more devious or a little more involved. And certainly he is in this case. So that's one of the things I like is building up Watson's role a little bit.
I applaud that because I like that too. Okay, we're running long. Oh my gosh. So just tell us real quick what else you're writing, and then we'll go.
Okay, I have our local Scion, the crew of the Bark Lone Star, puts out an anthology every year. I have one coming out this year. It's about stories that were rejected by Sherlock by his editor, and it's a lot of fun. I have what if the Hound of the Baskervilles was really a werewolf and he attacked Sherlock Holmes?
Okay. The Bark Lone Star books are always fun. They really are. Okay.
Yeah. And I won't go into all the others. I have a novel that historical fiction novel that's coming out or finish. I need to finish. I wish it were coming out. No, it needs to be finished.
You wish you were over at that step, right? Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, Lisa. Okay, Derek, we've got like 4 minutes. So tell us quick about your story.
Got it. All right. So my story is titled The Adventure of the Latin Tutor, and it's based on the usher of Lee House School. And I knew the minute that I heard this project, that was the story I wanted to do. I love that story for a couple of reasons. One, I'm a teacher. That's my day job. And so any of the education stories Doyle wrote, Three Students is one of my favorite Sherlock Holmes stories, for example. I think those are just really well done. And the way that this story unfolds, it's a mystery. But it's almost like the main character, Weld, is almost like the Watson character because he's just not really getting all the clues. He's sort of getting them. But then, of course, you get the reveal at the end for what really happened. And so I thought it was very easy to plug Holmes into this story and kind of as the detective solving it.
Okay. All right. Well, tell us about what else you're doing. I'm sorry to rush you, but I know that
you're good.
Promise to keep everybody here.
Yeah, no, you're good. You're good. Okay. So lots of projects. Some of you guys already mentioned some of the publications coming up, like the Next Year of Mystery, 89 and 90. Excited to hear some of you guys. Katie had mentioned she's going to participate in it, and I know a few others, I believe, mentioned that as well. So very excited to hear that. I'm working on a couple of, I'm always working on projects, but right now for the Gillette Castle, last year we put out Crimes on Torrington Road, William Gillette's only novel. This year we're putting out, I don't know if that's actually with my background, if you can really see that well, but it's a book called Sherlock Holmes and Much More by Doris E. Cook. And we are putting out a new edition of it. It hasn't been published since I think 1970. And so we're working with the castle on that. And if all goes well, I'll be giving a talk on June 8th at Gillette Castle. Brian will be joining me as well. And so I'll talk more about that as you know, it's still early and I don't want plans to fall through. I'm working on a follow-up to Crimes for Christmas, the Sherlock Holmes Advent Calendar book I did in association with the Strand magazine. And that should, we'll see. I'm hoping that it comes out. I'm still at the early stages of it. It might need to come out in 26. We'll see. And then a number of projects. So we're starting another Year of Mystery series with this one with Solar Ponds. Happy that David Markham has agreed to be the editor of that series. So that should be pretty exciting. And then doing another Holmes Lovecraft collection, co-editing with my brother. And that should be a lot of fun. So those are kind of what's going on. Plus, we're publishing a lot of stuff, as you guys know. This book being one of our upcoming publications. So yeah, I think that's probably a good place for me to stop.
Okay, so you're probably going to sleep just an hour a night this year. Okay, fair enough. All right. Okay, so I know we're at 10 o'clock and I know people have places to go. Does anybody want to ask any questions really quickly? Is there something that you're just burning to know other than where you can get the book, Derek?
Oh yeah, well currently
where to get the book?
Okay, I could say quickly that currently the book is on, we're having a Kickstarter campaign for the book. And so I can send that out to everyone if they're interested. The nice thing about the Kickstarter edition is it's 2 volumes. It includes all the original stories followed by the new author stories. That's not going to be the case when it comes out in bookstores. It'll be 1 volume with just the new stories. So the nice thing with the 2 volumes, you can read Doyle's work, then go to the new story. So that's kind of a cool setup for that. But the Kickstarter is huge. Margie's doing a great job, and it's already at 1,000% of its original goal. So pretty impressed with everything. So nice job, Margie, and authors as well, of course, and authors as well.
Yeah, there's 17. There's a lot of good names there, and people know the work. And some of the ones who couldn't be with us today, I would have loved to have got Chris Chen and a few other people over here. We could talk all day, so we won't. Does anybody have any questions they want to ask really quick before we let you go? Not too late, I don't think. No?
Margie, what else are you working on? We didn't get a chance to hear from you too much.
Oh, okay. The only thing I see, so for the book, I did the leather funnel and did a sequel. I love that story with the psychometry, and the guy sleeps by the funnel and he gets to dream of what happened in the past. And so my follow-up to that was, well, what happened to him because he had this unexplainable thing happen? So this is what happened to that guy who slept by it. I really have been fascinated with that story too, because Conan Doyle said that the leather funnel was as close to literature as he could get. So it's kind of always stuck into my head, is that, why did he think that? So I've read it several times, especially when I'm thinking about if I'm doing Gothic stories, and I like, as you know, to bring in his characters and do stuff with them. And so I always go back to that story to see, okay, so why is it literature? What was it he liked about it so much? And so that's where I went. And then I am, as several other people on here said, trying to start a novel. As a lot of you are a lot farther along. This is my first one. So this year I had the short story in the Doyle Annual, One on a Lonesome Road, that was very well received. So I'm thinking about taking that story and having a jumping off point to tell you what happens next in a novel. So we'll see. I also have half an idea for a Holmes collection. It's all your fault because every time I think I'm finished with Holmes, as far as writing, you told me one time, every time you think you're finished, Watson's going to come whisper in your ear and you're going to say, oh, but what if you did this? So we'll see if any of that comes to be. Okay, that's all. Thank you. All right, put the link in the chat. And just in case anybody hasn't seen it, promise me you've all seen it somewhere. So
Can I ask a question?
yes.
I'm just wondering if you're planning on, because he wrote more than the Round the Fire stories, right? There's a bunch of other stories, probably enough for another volume of supernatural stuff. Might you do a second volume of this idea?
Well, the idea, yes. I don't know if the other ones were collected under that title. I know there's a whole Gothic set.
Yeah,
Oxford
there's
World
Tales of
Classic
Unease, but
did the collection a few
yeah.
years back, and that's the one that I studied when I was doing Genius of the Place. But yeah, I think it would be fun. Like this book seems to be off to a great start. It's going to be well received. So it would be fun to do another one. I don't know if I'm not going to do it by myself because I need a copy editor, Nancy Holder and Carla Coop. But and Carla was doing it anyway, volunteer. I love editing, but all that line editing makes me tired. And thank you, Katie, for sending me the list of British nitpickings to watch for. So, yes, we love Brit picks. So
my pleasure.
So we don't have any falls instead of autumn and all of that sort of thing. All right.
Margie.
Yes.
Carla's better than I am.
Well, no, you're just two different people, and you're both very good. I could more the merrier. I'm just saying. Anyway, we shall see. So thank you for asking. Okay, Derek, I think.
All right. I want to thank everybody for coming. This was a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, no matter where you are, wherever you are in the world. But Margie, thank you so much for organizing this. Comments in the chat have been people are really enjoying it. And a couple of things, like if you haven't been paying attention to the chat, Katie's put in a couple of links if you're interested. One of her novels she put a link into, as well as her Liar League submission. And I definitely recommend checking all of that out. Also, please just check out the Kickstarter page, even if you're not like gonna back the Kickstarter, which is completely fine. Read the author interviews because they're going to start being posted soon, and I'll have this recording also posted as well.
Yeah, actually, of the 17, I believe 15 or 16 of us did interviews, and so there's a lot of information there, and it's just kind of fun to see what people are thinking. Okay, I'll stop talking. I said
that's all right. It's going to come out. All right, and Margie, I think we all agree you're the GOAT here, and so let's round of a virtual applause again for Margie and the authors.
For my people.
If I could just inject something quickly, this is the first time I've heard of this, and I'm really glad I came to this meeting. But I also was just thinking that the Round the Red Lamp Tales, this would work very well too. Mm-hmm. Particularly because they could almost all work as Watson bringing things to Holmes. So that might be a future project as well.
Well, we might just end up tapping you to talk about it, Greg Sullivan. Just make a note. But yeah, it would be.
I would love to. My mentor in Sherlockian and Doylean things was Dr. Al Roden, and he wrote an annotated version of the Round the Red Lamp Tales, which I have a copy of, which I treasure.
I'm fairly certain I probably read it, to be honest with you. Okay. All right. Well,
thank you, Greg. That's a great idea.
That away. Sounds good to me. Okay. All right, guys. Shall we go?
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you all so much.
We'll be back Saturday, April 5th. And to be determined what the talk is going to be about for that day. So I will get back to you, and take care, everyone. Thank you so much again, Margie.
Okay.